And so with that said, what I want to do, top 6 teams in the country all lost. Again, as a quick reminder, Gonzaga lost at St. Mary's, Arizona lost to Colorado, Auburn lost to Tennessee, Purdue lost at Michigan State, Kansas lost at Baylor, Kentucky lost at Arkansas. And what I want to do is rank the losses from least concerning to most concerning. From 6 to 1, 6 is the least concerned I am about a team, 1 is the most concerned I am. And so let's start with number 6. And in terms of the least concerned out of every team out of the top 6 that lost on Saturday, I would say number 6 is the Arizona Wildcats. And I know that every time I talk about Arizona, there's this immediate, they play in the Pac-12, they're not tested, they won't be ready, whatever. And what I would say is, listen, I don't think the Pac-12 is the best conference in college basketball. Then again, I didn't think it was the best conference last year, and they had, 3 teams in the Elite Eight and 4 teams in the Sweet 16? I remember joking about that during the NCAA tournament. Maybe Bill Walton was the only sane one all along. But I bring it up because when I look at Saturday, the least concerned out of all of these teams that I am is of Arizona. Because there's a couple reasons why. First of all, it's what I always talk about. This is February. You have to go on the road. At some point, teams are going to lose. First of all, for Arizona, the great news is they're basically at full strength. You don't have to worry about injuries. You don't have to worry about a weird quirk. You don't have to worry about Colorado exposing something that maybe it's a big flaw that can be exposed in the tournament. I just think that Arizona, when we talk about them, they've lost 1 game since Christmas. They're 14-1 in their last 15 games, and this was their 4th road game in 6 games. And at some point, you're just going to have a bad game. And if you look at the stats kind of back that up, okay? So first of all, I always talk about the offense because I think the offense is the more interesting thing with Arizona. I think it'd be easy to say, well, this proves if you can slow them down, you can beat them. Well, yeah, if you hold any team to 63 points, you can beat them in the NCAA tournament. The problem is we now have a 4-month sample size of teams trying to slow down Arizona, and nobody has really been successful, including some of the best defensive coaches in college basketball, whether it's Dana Altman, whether it's Mick Cronin, whether it's whoever. Not a lot of people have been successful slowing down Arizona, and so to me the question becomes, was Arizona actually quote-unquote slowed down? Or did they, I don't know, call me crazy, just miss some shots that they normally make? Because to me, it's the latter. Arizona on the season shoots 57% from 2-point range in terms of inside the 3-point arc. They shot 45% on Saturday. They shoot 35% from 3. They shot 28% on Saturday. So yes, this could be the downfall of Rome. This could be the sign that they were overrated all along. Or this could just be a game where they miss some shots they normally make. The other thing that stood out to me definitively is what I told you last week about Arizona. Everybody is so focused on Arizona's offense, and with good reason. It's fun to watch. I think they're the most fun team in college basketball to watch when they're clicking. What I don't think people realize, though, is that the defense has been excellent all season long. And so when I look at this game, that's why I'm not worried, because this was the one-game outlier defensively as well for Arizona. Came into the game ranked number 3 nationally in field goal percentage defense, allowing 38% shooting from opposing teams. Only Houston and Gonzaga were better, or only Houston was better, or whatever. And they allowed 48% from the field on Saturday. So yes, maybe this proves that they were overrated all along. Maybe you should be mortified, and maybe this is reason you don't pick Arizona in your bracket. Or maybe it was just a weird loss that you have in February. There's nothing you can do, and you move on. Out of all top 6 teams that are ranked, I am least concerned about this loss for Arizona. In terms of the next team that I am least concerned about when it comes to Saturday's losses, I'll put Kentucky at number 5, and I actually almost had them at number 6. Because first of all, they went on the road. They were actually an underdog on the road. They were not expected to win according to the odds makers in Vegas. So it's hard to criticize Kentucky for losing a game that the odds maker said you're probably not going to win. Top 20 team on the road. Arkansas has obviously beaten Tennessee in the last couple weeks at home. Auburn the last couple weeks at home. They play LSU this weekend. And so I bring it up because if you're a Kentucky fan, I don't know that you should be worried because I don't know that anybody expected you to win. As a matter of fact, I'll take it a step further. I would argue, and I might have made this argument on Friday's show, I can't remember. I think this might actually be the most impressive 3-game stretch of Kentucky's season. And what does that mean? Well, listen, if you follow college basketball, you know that Kentucky has not been at full strength, has not been 100% healthy over the last couple games. Their starting backcourt, Severe Wheeler, Ty Washington, was out each of the last 2 games, neither of them started on Saturday against Arkansas, although both played significant time. And so for Kentucky to go 2-1 over that stretch, so they had 3 games without their starting backcourt at 100%. Beat Alabama, which is going to be an NCAA tournament team, beat LSU, which is going to be an NCAA tournament team, and easily could have won at Arkansas on Saturday. Great game. Arkansas deserved to win. It's no discredit to them. But for Kentucky to go 2-1 over that stretch without its starting backcourt for 2 of those games and without those guys at 100% for one of them, I actually have come away more impressed with Kentucky over this last 3-game stretch than I am concerned. And out of the 6 teams that lost, I think you can make the argument that they should be number 6 in terms of least concerning. On top of that, I think, look, Oscar Tshiebwe had another incredible game. I mean, when Arkansas fans are praising him, talking about how incredible he is, 30 points and 18 rebounds, I think it speaks to Kentucky or Oscar Tshiebwe and kind of his candidacy as a National Player of the Year. But overall, I have no concerns about Kentucky in terms of if they can get to full strength that they're a title contender. Why I did not have them at number 6, though, is because I do think it is kind of officially time to worry about, are we going to see this team ever at full strength again, okay? Because I'm not wishing ill will. And as I said on Friday's show, I do not blame John Calipari for not playing his guys in this late in the season, because you got to get ready for the SEC tournament and you got to get ready for those 6 games in the NCAA tournament that will ultimately define this team's legacy. But at the same time, I think it's time to start calling a spade, and we are now at a point where really, if you go back to, say, the start of SEC play, late December, early January, it is now late February, and I think you could probably make an argument, I don't even think it's up for debate, that really over the past 2 months, Kentucky has spent more time at less than full strength than they have at full strength. And to be clear, listen, this is basketball. It's a long season. You're going to have injuries. But when you have a guy, Ty Washington, who has had 2 separate ankle injuries, taken a long time to come back from each, that becomes concerning. When Severe Wheeler had 2 different kind of head trauma injury type things, concussion, and I know the second one against Auburn, he came back into the game, and then you have a separate injury on top of that, at some point you got to be concerned, just can this guy stay healthy over the course of a 40-game college basketball season? Jacob Toppin's been nicked up as well. So in terms of Kentucky, listen, I'll just say this. If Kentucky is 100%, I think you can actually make the case they are the best team in college basketball. It might, I don't want to say it's not a debate, but I don't really know that it's actually a debate that Kentucky might be the best team in the country. I mean, when they were at full strength, they beat Tennessee by 30, and they beat Kansas by 20 on the road. If they can get back to that, I think they're probably the best team in college basketball. My question is, can they actually get back there? Ranking teams from least concerning loss on Saturday to most concerning, number 4 out of the 6, it is Gonzaga. And so listen, again, Gonzaga, it's what I always say. I know what you want to say. This proves their conference stinks. They're overrated. They're this, they're that, they're whatever. And, if that's your takeaway, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. I'm not going to sit here and debate with you. I'm not going to sit here and yell and scream with you. What I would also say is that when it comes to Gonzaga's conference, the WCC, they're probably going to get more NCAA tournament teams than the ACC is. And so if you want to argue that Gonzaga doesn't play anybody, well, again, I've said it for weeks. You better argue that Duke doesn't play anybody either. I would also say that that this St. Mary's team that Gonzaga lost to on Saturday, they already beat Notre Dame, which is a potential tournament team. They already beat Oregon, which is a potential tournament team. They have some really nice wins on their resume out of conference against Power 5 teams. What I would also say about this loss is that I do believe that St. Mary's is kind of uniquely built to beat Gonzaga. Everybody knows, I don't think everybody knows, but I think there's 2 clear ways that if you're game planning to beat Gonzaga, there's 2 clear things that you want to do. One, you want to really, really, really slow down the game as much as you can, almost like what UCLA did in the Final Four last year, where they basically, ground the game to an absolute halt against Gonzaga. Well, some teams can try to do that, and some teams just do it naturally, and St. Mary's is one of them. St. Mary's is ranked 323rd out of 358 teams in college basketball in terms of tempo, which means they play really slow, they take a lot of time off the clock, and they get really highly efficient shots. So some teams are going to try to do that in March, but that's not who they are. That is who St. Mary's is. They were at home, and on top of that, if you watch St. Mary's, they're kind of this big, physical, rugged team. a bunch of Australian guys. I'm not generalizing or stereotyping Australian guys, but just big, tough, physical in the paint. And they were able to kind of just mess with Chet Holmgren, who's a very skilled big, but just, listen, I don't think I'm knocking him. He's not very strong, right? He's 190 pounds at 7'1". He'll get there. He'll be a good NBA player, but he's not there yet. And so I think St. Mary's at home, I watched the first game that these two teams played, and St. Mary's, they trailed for most of the game, but really cut the lead to about, 6, 7, 8 points late in that game and had a chance even the first time that these two teams played in Spokane to get a win. So on Saturday, they do actually pull off the victory. And what I would say is, in terms of the big picture, I'm not terribly concerned about Gonzaga. I don't think they're the overwhelming national title favorite like the sports books tell you, which I discussed on Friday's episode. But at the same time, I do think that St. Mary's, because of how they play, because of their personnel, I do think they put together the blueprint to beat Gonzaga if you have the right team and the right personnel. First of all, when it comes to Gonzaga, again, there's two ways. You slow them down, you bully everybody down low, and this is where I get concerned with Gonzaga, is first of all, I don't think that they have the guards that can absolutely take over games like they did last year. Listen, we can criticize Gonzaga for losing in the national title game. We can criticize, all sorts of whatever you want to criticize. They were a really awesome college basketball team last year, and I always joke about it. It's like, listen, sometimes in college basketball, there are just teams that are, sometimes you just run into a team that's better than you in March, and it doesn't mean you're bad and it doesn't mean you're overrated. It just means that somebody was better than you, and that was exactly what happened last year in the NCAA tournament. Gonzaga steamrolls through the regular season. They steamroll through the NCAA tournament, destroy Creighton, destroy USC, and then they get to a Final Four, and they just ran into a better team in Baylor than them. But it doesn't change the fact that they had guys that could completely take over games. Jalen Suggs, 14.5 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists per game, 2 steals, was probably the most dynamic guard in college basketball. That's why he was a top 5 pick. Corey Kispert, 19 points per game, 44% from 3. My boy, I haven't talked about him in a while. I miss him so much. Joel, 12 points, 7 boards, 2.5 assists per game. They had guys that could take over games, and I just don't think Gonzaga has those guys this year. On top of that, when you can get low, when you can bully Chet Holmgren, when you can limit Drew Timme, which is everything that St. Mary's did, I do think they're much more beatable than they were last year. At the same time, they have not lost since December, and at the same time, I do believe that St. Mary's is uniquely built to beat them. I am not as worried about this Gonzaga loss as everybody else. I don't think it proves anything other than that they can win a national championship, but they're not an overwhelming favorite like they were a year ago. Let's get to number 3 on the least concern to most concerned. Number 3 is Kansas. And in Kansas' defense, what I would say is I would argue they're right up there with Kentucky, which lost at Arkansas, and Auburn, which lost to Tennessee, in terms of the toughest games on Saturday. So, yes, I understand that Kansas lost. Not many teams are supposed to go into the reigning national champion on a Saturday night, top 10 team, maybe the best player in the Big 12, James Akinjo, outside of Ochai Agbaji, 2 first-round picks on the wing, and you're not supposed to win that game. And so on the one hand, no, I'm not. I don't think that proves Kansas is overrated. Kansas is terrible. But what I will say, Kansas was my preseason national championship pick. My pick, Kansas. I do think Saturday showed, much like Gonzaga, with the right matchup, they can be beaten, absolutely no doubt. And my biggest concern with Kansas, I talked about it on last show in terms of the national title odds, is that they have the best player in the Big 12, probably the first-team All-American in Ochai Agbaji. But outside of that, they don't have a ton of guys that you can absolutely rely on night in, night out, game in, game out, right? They don't have consistent low post play with David McCormick. Their wings are good, but with the right matchups can be taken out. Well, what happened on Saturday? Baylor has 2 guys, Kendall Brown, Jeremy Sohan, who are going to be first-round picks on the wing, great defenders, and what happened? Ochai Agbaji was absolutely awesome, and then from there, everybody else struggled. Christian Brown, who has been a revelation this year, 17 points, but it came on 6 of 13 shooting from the field. Struggled to really kind of get going. Jalen Wilson, 7 points in that loss. And so when it comes to Kansas, they had probably the quote-unquote best loss of everybody in college basketball on Saturday, except for maybe Kentucky. But I do think that it showed cause for concern. Like I said, outside of Ochai Agbaji, who are the guys that you can consistently rely on every single game? Jalen Wilson has his moments, averages 11 points per game. He had 7 the other day. Christian Brown, 6 of 13 from the field. 1 assist, 1 turnover. All I'm saying is I like Kansas. I don't love them. And I do think there's a very clear blueprint to beat them. And that's why I would be worried. By the way, the teams that they've struggled with this year. Lost to Texas Tech, easily could have lost the second game against Texas Tech. Texas Tech is one of the elite defensive teams in college basketball. Kentucky has guys on the perimeter that can take you out of your comfort zone with Jacob Toppin, etc. Kentucky destroyed them. And then again, Kansas lost to Baylor on Saturday. Let's get to number 2 and number 1. And this is where I think we definitively learned, okay, there's some real concern for these teams going forward, and maybe it might even be time to eliminate them as national championship conversations. I think we learned a lot about both of these teams on Saturday. And the 2 teams, the first one, we'll start at number 2, and then we'll go to number 1. Number 2, least concerned to most concerned. So least concerned, number 6 is Arizona, number 5 is Kentucky, number 4 is Gonzaga, number 3 is Kansas. Number 2, out of all the teams, I was most concerned about every team the most except for this one. Number 2 is the Purdue Boilermakers. And listen, all year long, people have been trying to sell me on Purdue. Purdue, this is the year, national championship, this and that. And what I said is, I don't really see it. You know, I know I'm doing my Larry David pretty good voice. They're pretty good. They're not great. They're not going to win a national championship, and I think Saturday proved it. First of all, the defense has been discussed at length, right? And I think at this point, the defense has actually gotten better. And the conversation is kind of become the defense has become so quote-unquote overrated that they're actually a little bit underrated defensively right now. Okay, I don't think they're a perfect defensive team, but if you look at their last several games, 68 points allowed to Michigan State, 72 allowed to Rutgers, 64 to Northwestern, 61 to Maryland. For the most part, they have been pretty good defensively over the last couple weeks. Now, over the totality of the season, they rank in the 180s in terms of defensive efficiency, and you can't win a national championship if you're that good. Listen, you know how everybody on social media likes to argue about everything? And you could be like, the sky is blue, and they'll be like, well, let me tell you. And I talked about this the other day with all these guys on social media. You know how people like to argue? Oh, the sky's blue. No, I don't know. You see last Tuesday? A little bit gray. Well, listen, everybody likes to argue about all sorts of things, especially sports-related. You cannot argue. It is not debatable. If you are as bad defensively as Purdue is over the course of the season, you can't win a national championship. History says it is impossible. So that's my first concern with Purdue. You can argue with me, you can debate me, you can say, yeah, but in 1948, no, listen, historically, if you are as bad as Purdue is defensively, you can't win a national championship. Here's where I'm getting a little concerned, though. I watched that Michigan State game closely, and I've watched Purdue a ton this year. I actually think the offense has more concerns than people talk about. Everyone talks about the defense. I'm a little worried about the offense. And on the one hand, you can sit there and say, how can you be worried about the offense? Well, let me explain why. This is why I'm Torres. I say stuff that nobody else will say. I don't care. I'll say it. First of all, yes, they average 81 points per game. But if you actually break down the numbers, about 70% of that offense comes from 4 different guys. Their star point guard, Jaden Ivey, averages 17 a game. Their big center, who I actually really like, we'll get to him in a minute, Zach Edey, averages 14.8 points per game in just 19 minutes of play. So that's that's an average of close to 30 points per game over 40 minutes. Their other big guy, Travion Williams, averages 11.9 points per game. Sasha Stefanovic averages right around 11. So here's the deal. First of all, the offense is so great, except that 70% of the offense comes from 4 guys, and as we saw on Saturday against Michigan State, if one of them has a bad game, and Sasha Stefanovic did, all of a sudden, they're not that great offensively. All of a sudden, they need other guys to do things that they're not capable of doing. Kentucky has 5, 6, 7 guys that can get you 20 points. Duke has 4, 5, 6 guys that can get you 20 points. Gonzaga has 4 or 5 guys that can do that. Purdue has basically one guy that can get you 25, 2 guys that can get you 20, 1 guy that can get you 15, and nobody else that can do anything. So that's 1. 2, Zach Edey, their big guy, was in foul trouble on Saturday. And I will say, if you've never watched Purdue, he's this 7'4" behemoth. And to his credit, he kind of stays out of foul trouble. I think that's why Matt Painter only plays him about 19 minutes per game. But if you watch Purdue, I mean, he is called differently in terms of how the referees handle him. And it's because he's 7'4" and they don't know what to do with him. So one, he was in foul trouble all day on Saturday. I know foul trouble generally hasn't been a concern, but it limits how much you can play him. Here's the last thing on Purdue's offense that I saw on Saturday that I think people would deem to be a hot take. I believe I'm correct. I don't believe it's a hot take. So as I said, Purdue has this kid, Jaden Ivey, point guard. He's going to be a top 10 pick. He might be a top 5 pick. He's got a lot of John Morant in his game, 17 points per game, 5 rebounds, 37% from 3. Really, really, really talented player. And he might be the best player in this tournament, right up there with Jabari Smith, Paolo Banchero, Johnny Davis from Wisconsin, whatever. Here's my concern, though. If you actually watch Purdue, I believe they have a little bit of an identity crisis when it comes to who they are offensively. That's going to sound crazy. They average 81 a game. They're one of the best offensive. How could you say that, Torres? Well, let me explain. Chill out. Let me explain. When you watch Purdue, watch closely next time. They have this kid, Jaden Ivey. He's amazing. He's awesome. He's fun. He's great with college basketball. He's great on highlights. Everything. Every time he does something, Twitter goes crazy. But if you actually watch Purdue, this is what I believe. Their best offense is when they dump the ball to Zach Edey, their big 7'4" center. Because if you watch him, when he catches the ball in the post, there's nothing you can do. He's 7'4". He has a soft touch. You have to double him. He's a good passer out of the post. And Purdue is actually at its best kind of playing this old school Big Ten grinded out basketball. But they have this new age point guard that's like Ja Morant, and he wants to take over, but then he knows that sometimes he needs to dump the ball to the post. And so when I look at Purdue, it's no disrespect, but I think the defense proves you can't win a national championship. But I think the offense has issues as well in terms of an identity. I still think this is probably a Sweet 16 team. I think they're going to be a number 1 or number 2 seed. I think they can get to an Elite 8, even a Final 4. I do not believe they can win a national championship, though. And when you're talking about a top 5 team in the country, obviously the expectation is national championships. Finally, number 1. Who am I most concerned about after Saturday? Well, you do some mental math. I already talked about Arizona, talked about Kentucky, talked about Gonzaga, talked about Kansas, talked about Purdue. Number 1 team in the country I'm most concerned about after Saturday, it's Auburn. And a couple things. One, Auburn fans, don't tell me I hate your team. 2 weeks ago, I said there's only 5 teams in the country that can win the national championship. Auburn was one of them. On top of that, love Bruce Pearl. Been great to me. Great guest on this show. Has always given me his time. Very grateful for Bruce Pearl and what he does for me in this show. With that said, though, like we have, you understand, like it's time to be concerned, right? Auburn fans is, oh, it's this, it's that. We're still this, we're still that. Last 5 road games, Auburn has now gone 2-3 overall. And in those the 2 wins were against Georgia by 2 points, Missouri by 1, the 2 worst teams in the SEC. And I understand that, yes, you lost at Arkansas, a top 20 team. Yes, you lost to Tennessee on Saturday, a top 20 team. Yes, you lost to Florida, which may make the NCAA tournament. But on top of that, what I would be worried about, Auburn hasn't looked that great at home of late. Fell down 14-3 against Vanderbilt the other day. Struggled against Ole Miss to put them away. Auburn played its best basketball a month ago. And so I think in terms of the X's and O's of it, one, I hate to be critical, don't like to criticize 18, 19-year-old kids. Their guards just aren't good enough. And this has been a topic of conversation from the beginning. I remember watching them in December against St. Louis and saying, like, St. Louis has better guards than Auburn. Now, Walker Kessler's amazing. Jabari Smith is amazing. But St. Louis has better guards than Auburn. And it's been kind of backed up over the last couple games. Saturday at Tennessee, there's no doubt who the better backcourt was. It was Kennedy Chandler and Zakai Ziegler. Seb Jasper, 0 of 2 from the field. 1 assist, 1 turnover. Wendell Green, 2 of 15 from the field. Both these guys, by the way, transferred up from the low major level, and it takes time. And some of these guys don't click. And it's not a criticism, and it's not to say they're bad people or bad humans or bad whatever. I just don't know that they're good enough. And so when I look at Auburn, I could go on and on and on and on and on. But I look at this Auburn team, and I said it the other day, but it's the truth. They remind me of the 2019 Tennessee Volunteers. Remember Tennessee 2019 a few years ago? They were number 1 in the country for basically the entire season. Grant Williams, Admiral Schofield, Jordan Bone. And for like December, they just steamroll everybody. They beat Gonzaga in this instant classic game. January, they get to number 1 in the country. Late January, they're awesome. And then all of a sudden in February, start to lose a game here. Not as dominant there. Close game here that shouldn't be there. Get to the SEC tournament, ironically get killed by Auburn. and then from there end up losing in the NCAA tournament in the Sweet 16 to Purdue. And so sometimes in college basketball, this just happens, right? It was we got a little bit of that with Michigan last year, where they were awesome, like unbeatable in December and January and late January and early February, and then they just kind of hit a wall. And I kind of feel that way with Auburn. Of all the teams that played on Saturday that lost, those top 6 teams, Auburn is the one I am most concerned about.